Well, let me just welcome folks who've joined us this another exciting instalment of Meet the Family and getting to know the family in testimony time. Now, the most astute of you will realise that the two of us have been on screen before, but it's a slight role reversal. And we decided to put Hamish in the hot seat today. And Hamish, you're going to be answering the questions as I put them to you, so you can enjoy some of that pain. I should really ask you, how are you?
I'm doing okay, thank you, Stuart. Nice to see you.
Good. You had a good day so far?
It's been not too bad, thank you. A little bit of helping set up the larder this morning and getting some stuff from Waitrose since a few folks were on holiday, so that was quite good. And then I had a wee Forth Valley Keswick meeting. I'm part of the committee for Forth Valley Keswick, which happens in October, so had that this morning as well.
Good plugs just to get in there straight away.
Absolutely.
Tell us a bit about the larder. Most folks will be aware of the larder and what goes on, but maybe you could just outline that for us.
Yeah, the larder basically started up in Bridge of Allen. A number of folks there wanted to have a response to COVID, I think, to help some folks who were struggling. And so it's really just a community food bank, community fridge type idea. We got on board at the start of this year, and it runs on a Tuesday in the church. And folks in the community can pop in and just grab a few items, fresh items, stuff that's the supermarkets give us some stuff, part of the food share, fair share package. So that's really good. And I think this morning we have fed 80 people through the stuff that's been picked up. So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones we've talked before, haven't we, about it would be better if that need wasn't there. But while that need is there, it's encouraging that we can do that, and it has been really well used by the community and wider afield. So that was great. And you mentioned Forth Valley Keswick. What's that all about?
That is, many folks will know about the Keswick Convention that happens every summer down in lovely Keswick in the Lake District. A number of areas around the country have their own little offshoots. So Forth Valley Keswick started 2 years ago, and they've had one in-person event and one online event. This year, first weekend in October, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, in the Inshira Grange Hotel, Friday, Saturday, Sunday evenings. And I do believe this year our praise band is going to be playing at one of the evenings, and Tim Chester is the speaker. So an opportunity really for a number of Christians across the churches to gather together.
Yep, and all going well, that will be in person this year.
All going well, that is the plan.
Well, listen, we've fired straight in with some big questions there, and that's two things you'll be able to share about. But folks will know you, I'm sure. But why, in the spirit of how this has gone for everybody else, you need to tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
A little bit about me. Well, I'm Hamish. I was born and brought up in Crieff, which is a wonderful little place. Met the beautiful love of my life, Morag, there through the church, which was just wonderful. We have 2 children, Andrew and Rebecca. I say children. They are grown up now, both working, which is a wonderful thing. My grandmother came from Leith originally, so we bit of a Hibs fan, which is knocked on to Andrew. Sadly, my daughter seems to have chosen one of those teams from Glasgow, which is, I just don't understand it. But so yeah, that's me. I worked in the bank before I came into ministry. Now the minister, best job in the world, it has to be said. Fully love this calling and vocation, and I say job, it is really a calling. I don't think anybody should ever treat ministry as a job, because you'll never last long if you treat like a job.
Well, and we'll maybe touch on that in a while about your your calling and all the rest of it. But as I say, we're going to stick with the same format that you've used so well to find out a little bit about your favourites. You've been throwing these favourites out to folks. Some of the things we've found out very interesting, so we'll see if yours are as interesting. So, favourite food, Hamish?
Favourite food? Oh, that'd be an interesting one. I like a whole variety of things. Steak's probably quite high up there, although recently I've been loving fish. A new fish shop down the Rat Block, which is rather nice. So I'm enjoying that.
And what about favourite holiday destination?
Oh, well, this will probably not come as a surprise to many people, but Tenerife would probably be a favourite holiday destination for us. A little bit of sunshine, a little bit of a nice island feel to it. Some lovely folks there.
I know you got lots of church connections out there, don't you?
and church connections as well, which is always a nice thing. Preached there a few times in the past.
Good. Thinking of church connections, who's your favourite deacon?
Oh, well, there's a tough gig in there.
Yeah, I'll move you on. We can chat about that afterwards. Tell me, Hamish, what's your favourite film? And I've got something written down from something you said years ago.
Favourite film? Well, do you know, I do love a variety of stuff. Lord of the Rings would be high up there. The Chronicles of Narnia, exceptional stories turned into film. Some great filmography. That's not the right word, is it? Some great cinema stuff going on there, which is good. Bond and Bourne are always great things, but my favourite really has to be, rather strangely, people will think, is The Sound of Music.
Yeah, I did have that written down. I think you mentioned that before. Does seem a bit of a strange favourite for a grown man to have, but you know, each to their own.
Absolutely.
You do like films, and I think Judy was talking about Lord of the Rings, wasn't she, a couple of weeks ago? What about music? What would be your favourite sort of type of music to listen to?
Oh, music. Do you know, and when I was younger, I listened to more music than I listen to now. It's more just on the background now. I had a rather strange teenage phase of being into country music for a while, which was rather random. Not quite sure why, but I think Proclaimers. Got to get the Proclaimers in there. Sunshine and Leaf is just...
Yeah, and you even managed to shoehorn the Proclaimers lyric into the sermon a couple of weeks ago, which is loads, by the way. I listen to all their stuff and think, oh, you could say that, you could say that. There's definitely an influence in their lives, definitely.
There is, I think.
Whether it's in their upbringing or whatever. So, favourite song then, in amongst all of that, favourite song, either secular or Christian?
Favourite song, I think, would be Sunshine and Leith from the secular perspective. But maybe that's more to do with my love for Easter Road. But it's a great song with some great lyrics. Christian-wise, Shane and Shane are really good at the moment, and they do a great version of Is He Worthy, which is a kind of cracking little song where the singer's almost asking a question and then answering it with Liz afterwards. Quite powerful, actually.
Yeah, I do love that track. It's a great song to think on, isn't it? And the last of our favourites, you've asked everyone else this. What would be your favourite verse?
Oh, my favourite verse. Well, see, this is a this is a tough one. The pastor can give you a whole load of answers. I mean, John 10:10. I've come to him of life in all its fullness. The John 15 stuff where he talks about greater love is no man in this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Those are great verses. Actually, my favourite verse, and it's a verse I've always hung on to in ministry. And I'm not sure I've actually ever shared it with anybody to tell them why. But it's 2 Corinthians 12:12. And Paul's talking about his love for the Corinthian Christians, the church in Corinth. And he says, I will gladly spend all I have and myself for you. So if I was to paraphrase it, I would say that's always been my kind of raison d'etre in ministry. I will gladly spend and be spent for the sake of the gospel. So for your behalf, for the last 16 years, I spend all of me to serve God and to serve you, which is just an amazing thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. I did write down it would be John. I thought it would be John, but you mentioned a couple. So that's and for us as a fellowship to hear that, I think that's such an encouragement to us, and that ties back with what you were saying before about, you know, it's a calling and it's not just a job, and I think we're very much aware of all that you do to be spent on our behalf. So we thank you for that. Okay, and what about your quick fire 5, which never really proved to be quick fire with many of us. Tell me, would you prefer a day in the garden or a day in the hills?
The hills.
The hills.
The hills.
Especially on a day like today, and
absolutely,
this week, I think we're promised lots of sunshine.
Yes. Well,
takeaway dinner or a meal out?
That depends on who the meal out is with. Probably more meal out these days. Used to be takeaway, more meal out.
Yeah. I think if you want those steaks, you really have to go out and get a proper steak, don't you?
Absolutely.
What about a good film or a good book?
Good book, I think.
Good book. Yeah, and you've got to say that with all those books neatly arranged behind you, and they are actually books, aren't they? They're not just a of cardboard cutout that you put up there for Zoom purposes.
They are actual books, but don't ask me how many of them I've actually read.
Okay, one more for you. Would you prefer to see Hibs win the league or Scotland win the World Cup?
Oh, Scotland won the World Cup, I think. There's always that dream as a boy growing up, isn't there, of scoring the winning goal in a Scotland World Cup winning team.
Yeah, maybe one day in our lifetime.
Maybe one day.
You never know.
Go back to a tournament.
And here's the one that we've wrestled with, all of us, as you've asked us, then, the Old Testament or the New Testament?
Oh, got to be both. Cop-out answer. It really does have to be both. I think the way it points to Jesus in the old, how he comes and prophecy is all fulfilled in the new. Do like lots of the new right enough with Paul's letters and the encouragements in there. But yeah, that's a
I guess, do you wrestle more with one than the other when it comes to maybe preparing for preaching?
Probably wrestle more. I was going to say I wrestle more with the old when I'm preaching, I think. Because I'm always conscious that I want to make sure that we see Jesus in some of those texts, and some of them are really quite tricky in the Old Testament.
But cause for us to study and to think and to ponder and and all the rest of it.
All of God's word is profitable, isn't it?
Absolutely, and very well answered as our spiritual head. So well done there. Hamish, the reason that we are doing this, and I've done lots of things like this over the last little while, we are in an unusual situation, and I guess ministry for you has been very different in this past year and a half. I think back to about a year and a half ago, or just maybe a bit less than that, when we sat and wrestled with should we be out of church for 2 or 3 weeks, and calling these Zoom calls and with the rest of the deacons to decide that. And it's laughable now to look back, isn't it, to think it was only going to be 2 or 3 weeks, but here we are, a year and a bit on. I wondered if maybe you could share some of maybe some of the frustrations that you found over that period, and then conversely maybe some of the encouragements that you feel that this opportunity has granted us.
Frustrations. I think one of the very first frustrations that is carried on for chunks of the time is preaching to a camera. That is one of the most frustrating things in the world. Now, I'm not one of these people that strives for perfection, so it is one take and that's it. One of the very early frustrations was I forgot to put my phone on silent or on do not disturb, and I was using my phone to record myself for a while, and I'd be 10 minutes into preaching the sermon, and because my phone wasn't on do not disturb, it would ring, and as soon as it rang, it stopped recording. So that was a real frustration, but just the frustration of looking at a screen and not looking at people is a big thing. I'm trying to think if there's other frustrations in there. I guess the frustration of not being able to go and see folks in hospital. Part of that pastor's job to love and to care for folks and be alongside them. And yet there's been a few folks in hospital and I'm just not allowed in to see them and to chat with them and to pray with them. Has been a real frustration as well that's ongoing, because I still can't quite get into hospitals yet either. So there's a real frustrations. And COVID guidance, man, COVID guidance. Every week I read to check up on COVID guidance, and it's not just one document.
No.
We cover something like 4 or 5 different pieces of guidance to run all the activities of the church. So just keeping a fresh eye on that every week. And then being frustrated, if I'm honest, being frustrated when people maybe have a wee moan about why we do what we do on a Sunday. And I'm like, people, come on, let's get our focus. Sunday's our focus for God, not for our frustrations with COVID. I share those frustrations. But unfortunately, I've just got to lead us through them. But encouragement.
And you have, I'm just going to say, you have led us so well. I know it's not been easy to be effectively a legislator and try and work your way through that guidance. And I've joined you at various points to try and work our way through. And as you say, it's it's one element, and then we look to another, and there's another link to someplace else, and you cover this or that. And I guess everybody's a wee bit different in the midst, but hopefully we're navigating just as well as we can, and taking most folks with us. But there'll also be some encouragements in there, and maybe some opportunities even for ministry that we might not have thought about had this not come along. So where are you in that kind of thinking?
Encouragements, do you know, I think just as one slight encouragement, I think we'll potentially only have 6 more weeks of some of these restrictions if things continue to go well and the dates indicated mean anything, although dates so far haven't meant very much. So there is an end in sight, I think, which is a great encouragement. I think for me, very quickly, to see so many people join us on the prayer meeting on Zoom. I mean, we used to get 12 or 15 out to the church latterly. Before that, 6 or 7. And instantly we had 30, 40 people the first little while on prayer meetings. And that's kept up to some extent all the way through. So, I mean, that's been a great encouragement that folks have wanted to pray together. So I've been really encouraged by that. And I think the Zoom prayer meeting's probably here to stay. I think we need to think about how we can do an in-person one alongside at a different time, potentially. But I think that's
I think you're right. I think even having recently engaged with some of our missionary partners, on a Thursday night, there's no reason that we couldn't continue to do that, because that gives us the ability to hook in with people live in that way.
Absolutely. And the Villellas who were on a month or so ago, I chatted to them about it afterwards, and they would be delighted to do that on a kind of ad hoc, ongoing basis. Because they don't need to travel. If we get the time zone right, which isn't too far out actually, it works well. So that would be good. Other encouragements, maybe I think a personal encouragement is just seeing some of the kids as they've grown up. I've been privileged to do a number of doorstep visits as we've worked our way through lockdown, and just to see the kids has been a wonderful thing. Even the one who passed my door and wanted his mum to knock the door because this is where Hamish stayed, to say hello. Those just cheer your heart up. And my biggest personal encouragement is slowing down a little bit. Now, obviously, there's still been a chunk of stuff to do, and it's been different this past year or so. But to not have the usual meetings and deadlines and things to go out to, I've really enjoyed an extended devotional time in the mornings, where I just sit down with my breakfast and my Bible and read and pray and ponder for an hour and a half. And that's been a real blessing and encouragement, and something that I need to keep trying to do. Obviously, I always have a devotional time, but just that extended time to pray for folks has been such a blessing for me. So I think I might deliberately try not to fill my diary quite so quickly and fully.
Yes. And it's trying to, it's been mindful of that, isn't it? And obviously you'll be called to do so many different things. And it's just being aware of, making sure the important things are in that diary first, and maybe our view on what's important changes that a little bit in the light of all that we've come through.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, it's good to hear some of those encouragements. It's good to know that you are encouraged from time to time, Hamish.
And actually, I should jump in with another one. Obviously we're going to be having a baptism in a couple of weeks' time. Another one beginning of September, and there's a few more folks wanting to chat about baptism as well. So I'm just really encouraged that God's at work in all of this, and folks' hearts and lives, which is
He has not been restricted. That's the important thing of all this. Well, Hamish, why don't you tell us a bit about maybe your conversion story, how you came to faith, and then maybe if you could tell us a bit about your calling to ministry. I know lots of us might have heard some of this in the past in sermons and things that at times you've shared, but just useful for us to be reminded about how that all came about, and then your journey to Compton.
I will try and be succinct. That'll be the challenge. No, it's not too hard, actually. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but my grandparents were godly folks, involved in the life of the church in Crieff, and had been all their days. So they encouraged my mum to take us along to Sunday school, which meant going to the morning service and sitting through that, counting the pipes and the pipe organ, playing word games with the text that was above the the pulpit to begin with. I'm not giving our young people any ideas, by the way, but that's why there's no text up on the on the front and the pipe organ in the church. And Sunday school was always then after the morning service. So we stayed on for that. As I grew, I wanted to join the YF. That was always a big thing for me. On a Sunday night, we had a strict rule in Crieff that you couldn't join the YF until you were 13. So it didn't matter you were at high school, you had to wait till your 13th birthday. Mine didn't fall until the February. Great excitement. And the first thing we did as a YF is came down to Stirling ice skating. And I fell and broke my leg. It was a big anticlimax.
Big it was worth the wait.
I think it was all to do with trying to show off in front of the girls.
Possibly.
But anyway, but round about that time as that followed, I remember one Sunday evening being in church and just hearing the gospel message. And for that, whatever it was that night, it was as if the veil had been lifted from my eyes. And I responded in faith that night. I'd love to say that changed who I was and what I did. But I think for the next 3 years, I probably did this pretend Christian thing. Where on a Sunday, I pretended to be this really nice Christian boy. And during the rest of the week, I pretended to have nothing to do with church life at all, or so it would seem to people potentially. When I was 16, I remember a sermon one night and being particularly challenged on the fact that I was called to follow Christ, and that meant there was no foot in two camps, no being a good guy on a Sunday and mucking around during the week. And so I made a fresh commitment at that point in time. Thought about baptism. I was always a bit scared of what my dad would think in particular. So I kind of put me off baptism for a little bit until I read John's Gospel. And John 15, we're all very familiar with the first part. I am the vine, you're the branches, greater love is no man in this and all of that. But the second half of the chapter starts off, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. And the world hates you because you don't belong to the world. You belong to me. And that just spoke to me, challenged me. And so I then went forward and got baptized. And the night I was baptized and came into membership of the church in Crieff, a certain young lady came into membership as well, which is just an interesting side fact.
Yeah, indeed.
In the midst of that. So I guess I'd always been in the church, but those moments just stood out for me. What it was to follow Christ. Obviously got involved in youth fellowship in the church, leading a little YF, we used to call it, 12, 13-year-olds. Remember taking 7 of them, 6 girls and a boy, to a Billy Graham crusade at Murrayfield. And Morag was supposed to come with me, but she decided she wanted to sing in the choir at the Billy Graham instead. So I had these kids, and I remember sitting thinking through Billy Graham, these kids are just bored out of skill. And then he made his appeal at the end, and to my absolute amazement, 6 of those kids got up and made their way to the front. It just blew my mind how God, by his Spirit, would work in that way. So that was a great encouragement. Did the YF, began to do the odd little bit of preaching. Folks would always begin to say, you should be a minister. I was like, no chance. Morag and I got married, had Andrew. People would constantly say, as I began to do more stuff in the church, you should be a minister, you should be a minister. Like, no, definitely not. We moved to Livingston just as Rebecca was born. I worked in the bank back then, so it was a wee move to Edinburgh. So a new church, a new set of people, a vow that we wouldn't get involved in church life for 6 months and just sit in the pews and take it easy. That didn't last very long. We began to lead the YF there, began to preach, and a different set of people. would come up and say, you should be a pastor. And it's like, no. And I got so blasé with it all that I would say that if God wants me, he'll put it in lights in the sky, or he'll stick a note through my door. Surprised nobody actually stuck a note through my door after I'd said that a few times to people. But we just got to a point, I guess, in work life where I was unsettled, and I don't think it was just work. I think God was doing that unsettling work of saying, right, Boyle. And so I began to seriously question God's call. I remember speaking to an older minister in town, and at the other Baptist church in town. And Bill and I sat and chatted, and I explained all of this to him about the lights and everything. And he gave me a wonderful illustration when he said to me, have you ever flown into an airport at night to land? And I was like, yeah. He says, what do you see? I say, a big bright light on the runway. And he says, well, what is that light? And I says, and it just took me a moment. I said, oh, actually, that'll be 1,000 little lights or whatever it is. And he says, that's it. And he says, and all those things you've told me down through the years of what people have said, how you felt God at work, they're all those little light bulbs making this runway in front of you that says, this is the time to get into ministry, sunshine. So God's timing's perfect.
Always.
Always. So we then, Morgan and I prayed, chatted about it, made a decision that I was going to go to the Baptist college. And the weekend I made that decision, I was preaching in the evening service. And I think for the first time, and it's an unusual thing to say, but I think for the first time I felt at home in the pulpit. Until then, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get nervous, still anxious about what I'm doing, still relying fully on God. But there was something that night whereby I just felt this is where I'm meant to be, which is an incredible thing. So I went to Baptist College. There's a story and a half. A year in, I've been preaching in Cornton once, got invited back a second time. I think Jim Murdoch had something to do with all of that back then, because we knew Jim and Betty from our Creef days. I think on my second or third visit, we were having lunch with the Hanlons, and after lunch we'd gone from the dining room through to the living room, having a cup of coffee, and Alan said, can I have a quiet word with you next door? And I was like, what did I say this morning that's caused offence to somebody? And Alan, of course, just said, listen, we've been chatting, how would you feel about becoming our pastor? And that led to a whole discussion around being at college and being in Cornton. But it just, the more we prayed about that, the more we realised it was God's call in God's time. So that was us to 4th of June 2005, ordained and inducted to ministry. Cracking terms, those are. I'm not sure what they mean, inducted. Yeah, that's... We've grown since. We've grown.
Yes, indeed. And there's a whole lot in there. Of course, you've just summarised that in 5 or 10 minutes. And just as you were chatting, actually, I think I've said to you before, I remember at Linwood Baptist Church, as a bunch of young people coming and spending a weekend at Creef Baptist Church and sleeping on the floor. And on the Saturday night, it was you that was hosting a night for your own YF. You had an external speaker, and we were part of that. And I can just about picture that. So it's funny to think all these years later, here you are, leading the church through here, and all those connections, those little lights. It's just, I guess now you can look back and see more of that. Even some of the experiences you've had in your working life, you might think that you're saying no to ministry, but these are all experiences that have made you the person you are and allowed you to be the minister you are, with all the various ways that you get involved in ministerial life. So absolutely, and I would not be the pastor I am without some of those experiences down through the years. So nothing is wasted in God's plan, and we do trust in his providence, and he has everything planned out. So he knew the exact moment for me to be in ministry. It wasn't those calls from a bunch of folks when I was 19, because that would have been far too
young and immature.
Yeah, but they in their own way were little lights though at the start of their life, So now you said there, Hamish, about you're still growing, and that's good to know. We're all growing in our faith. And this is a question that you've posed to most of us, I think, in these interviews to close, where you've asked folks, how they're growing at the moment, and whether there's any books or anything that you're reading right now that are sort of helping with that growth. So it's a sort of book review time as well.
Book review time. Well, there's so many books on the go at the moment. I'm still, believe it or not, I'm still trying to get my way through a novel that somebody bought me, which is really good actually. But I read it for a little spell, and then it goes on the shelf, and then I get caught up in other things. But and the only reason I did that is because there's a pile of books sitting on my printer beside me, which are my reading books at the moment. So I'm reading a wee book by Alistair Begg called Brave by Faith, which is just a real challenge through the book of Daniel. And I am contemplating Daniel as a future sermon series in the not distant future. So it's a little bit of devotional reading, but also preparatory.
Yeah.
And I'm actually reading a teenager's book at the moment, which I think some of our teens got on Sunday. 10 questions every teen should ask and answer about Christianity, which is a girl called Rebecca McLaughlin. So got some great insight into just some of the everyday things about our Christian faith and what people ask. And so it's been a nice little reminder to me as I'm reading my way through as well.
Yeah, I think one of our teenagers got that book, I have to say. So I'm looking forward to reading that as well. We've got the adult version, if you like, of that book. And it is quite a difficult read. It was a good read, but it'd be interesting just to compare that with what she's saying in the sort of the teenager version. So
more suited for your simple pastor to read.
And you're even more simple church secretary. Let's be honest. So Hamish, it'd be good to pray for you. I'll pray for you as we close. But what could we as a church fellowship be praying for you and for the family in these days?
I think always just for me that I remain rooted and grounded in God and in His Word, and that I stick to what I would call my three. I spoke about that verse in Corinthians about gladly spending and being spent for the sake of the gospel. But alongside that, my 3 P's for ministry always. Acts 6, where the apostles are set apart and the first deacons are appointed, so that they're set apart for prayer and for the word. And alongside that, John 21, where Jesus is restoring Peter. Do you love me? Do you love me? And it's like, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep. So my 3 P's, prayer, preaching, and pastoral care, that I would keep rooted in those when life begins to get a little bit busier again. Particularly the prayer and the reading for my own sake, and not just for preparing for anything else. And for us as a family, just that we would continue to keep our eyes on the Lord, and a practical level, that Rebecca might get a wee teaching job from some of these interviews that she's doing at the moment would be a real relief for a father. I think she's taken it all in her stride. It's maybe me that's a little bit more anxious on her behalf. But that's always a reminder to trust God.
Absolutely. Well, look, why don't I pray for you just now then, as opposed.
Thank you.
Father God, we thank you for just the encouragement that these sessions have been, as we've heard from folks within the families. We've got to know individuals, Lord, as we've shared about our testimonies and testified to your work in our lives. Lord, I thank you for just this time just now, just to share with Hamish. We thank you for him, for the calling that you've placed on his life, and for the way that you've led and that you've guided, Lord, from those early days when folks recognised those giftings, right to the present day when we see it so obviously in all the many ways that he has spent on our behalfs. And Lord, we just thank you for him. Thank you for Morag, for all the ways that she supports Hamish, and for all that they mean to us as a church family. Lord, we do pray, just as Hamish has shared, that in these days you would just allow him to continue to focus on your word on a day-by-day basis, Lord, that he would find time and be found in your word often. Lord, that you would speak to him by your Spirit as he prays and as he reads and as he ponders. And Lord, you would just continue to bless him in his devotional life, and bless him, Lord, as he prepares week by week so faithfully to preach to us. Just bless him in all that he seeks to do. Lord, I just want to thank you for the way that he leads us as a leadership group and all the things that he gets involved in, and so careful, Lord, just to try and take all of the church with us as we look to you for your leading and guiding. I just pray you continue to bless him as he goes through all the guidance and the protocols and all the things that we have to do. Lord, that you would just bless him in that endeavour also. Lord, practically, we just want to pray for Rebecca. We thank you so much for her, for all the fond memories we have of her, and ask, Lord, that you would just bless her in these days as she goes through various interviews. And Lord, it's just as she's settled into life up north, Lord, that you'd bless her. We thank you for the friendships that she's made up there, for the church family that she has and the way that she's involved. But Lord, we would just pray practically that you would bless her with a full-time job as she continues her teaching career. And Lord, we pray too for Andrew. We thank you for all the ways that he blesses us as a church family, as he leads us so well in song and in playing the guitar. Bless him and continue to work in his life, challenge him on his faith, Lord, and bless him, draw him always to you. And that's our prayer for all of us, Lord, that we would all seek to serve you. Lord, we would seek to love you more. And Lord, you would draw each of us to yourself more and more in these days. But Lord, just bless us. Thank you for this time we've enjoyed together. We pray all these things through our Saviour, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Hamish, thank you so much for being willing to be in the hot seat. Probably found that a bit more, I don't know, a bit less comfortable maybe than normal. But these have been a great addition over these lockdown months, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolute pleasure. And I should have said actually in all my encouragements, you prayed for the Andrew and Rebecca at the end. I think the encouragement of seeing Andrew record the songs that he's recorded over lockdown and the way he leads the worship is just such an encouragement. And the way Rebecca continues to get involved in a new church. Wonderful encouragements. And a wife that just always supports and encourages. Stuarty, thanks for doing this today. Folks, thanks for sticking with us these past weeks. We're going to take a break for a spell. We might be back in the future. But for now, thank you for watching and stay safe, stay well, keep your eyes fixed in Jesus.